Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson and Nick Whalen here. Another busy week 6, maybe not as chaotic as week 5 in terms of the crazy upsets. I think the big theme actually might have been all the wide receiver carnage. Sometimes fantasy and fandom is about disaster and surviving the disaster and getting through it there. Let's face it, there's one team that can win every year out of 32. There's one team out of 12 that can win your fantasy league. There's going to be a lot of things to muddle through. And week 6 definitely felt like a muddle through week, Nick.
Yeah, no question. And I think we're really going to feel the effects of those injuries in week 7 and perhaps week 8 when we have 6 teams on bye, and all 6 of those teams essentially have at least one, if not 2, fantasy viable wide receivers. So, not only a situation where you want to start planning for the week ahead, but you want to look ahead to week 8, week 9 as well. I mean, where do you want to start with all these wide receiver injuries? Do we go to Puka? Do we go to Garrett Wilson?
Let's go
Ridley, Marvin Harrison. Yeah, let's you lead it off then.
Then let's go Garrett Wilson. Suffered that knee injury. He got left earlier in the game too, where he went to medical tent. So I think he's dealing with multiple things. Came back into the game, but on the penultimate play, you saw his knee buckle as he's kind of twisting awkwardly on that 3rd and 8 play. Didn't come up with the catch. It got broken up. If he makes that catch, they're close enough to kick the field goal for sure. They may have already been close enough to kick the field goal, and given the track record of Justin Fields getting sacked in the game, maybe they probably should have. Anyhow, it was such a hideous game. Really a hideous game all game long as far as that goes. But that was just the cherry on top, and he's going to miss some time.
Yeah, they're saying a couple of weeks is the initial report that, according to Adam Schefter, it is a hyperextended knee. So not one of those situations where it's like, oh, we're waiting on the results. Like, we already have a diagnosis. It's a hyperextension, and the Jets have a bye, I believe, in week 9. So that would track, right? Maybe you give him these next 2 weeks, you get the bye, and then he comes back after that. But it's tough because these are 2 winnable games coming up for the Jets. You get the Panthers at home, and then at the Cincinnati Bengals. Should be 2 pretty decent fantasy spots. But I was just writing up my pick for that Jets Panthers game, and it's like I still think the Jets deep down aren't as bad as they've shown. I don't think they're a true 2-15 type of team, which they might finish as. But what do you do now when you take Garrett Wilson away from this offense? It's a team that put up 82 total yards, 20 yards of offense in the second half. Like, sometimes you see that, Jeff, especially in these weird London games, you're going up against a good defense where a team like the Jets just come out and do nothing in the first half. Almost always you see at least somewhat of a bounce back, even if it's not a 250-yard second half, but it's like, wow, it can't be any worse. It was somehow worse in the first half than it was the second half for the Jets. And we've talked about this all year. They came into the season with some, there were multiple concerns for this team, but the big one, at least for fantasy and just looking at the offense overall, was just there's absolutely nobody in that offense outside of Garrett Wilson. You take him away for a couple of weeks. We didn't even talk about the Jets when we did our sneaky ads video yesterday, because I don't know what receiver I would even have remote interest in. And I don't trust Justin Fields at this point. You're taking 9 sacks last week. And, some of those, of course, were on the offensive line. You're going up against a great defense, but Fields just looked completely lost.
He did. And I think some of this is that they're not providing him with the tools to win. But I think a lot of this is on him. We saw this in Chicago, where he takes sacks that most quarterbacks shouldn't take, that he tries to extend plays some of the time, but I think some of this is just real indecision. Like, okay, step on it, throw it away, do something. It wasn't like all those sacks where he was just completely engulfed and he had no chance. No. Not for an NFL quarterback. If it's someone in their first start, I would say that there. And you add in the fact, though, that you knew going into the season, wide receiver 2 was a real problem for this team.
Right.
And I love Mark Arum. I love you, man. Al Toon is not walking through that door. That's awesome.
I remember Al Toon's son, Nick Toon, who had a couple nice years at Wisconsin. And then I think it was like a 2nd or 3rd round pick of the Saints, if I recall.
Yeah. We were on him for a while until we weren't, but yeah, it was somehow made worse. Okay, Jets, you got me. You made missing Alan Lazard a thing.
Yeah.
Because he didn't make the trip. He had a personal issue, but he hasn't done much in a while. I mean, we're kind of mocking the notion that he might be a number 2 wide receiver. It's Josh Reynolds, Arian Smith, maybe Lazard, maybe Tyler Johnson. Oh boy. I mean,
yeah.
So when you whiff on a draft pick, an early draft pick at this position, it really hurts. It really shows. In the case of the Jets, it's Malachi Corley. That was a complete utter whiff for this, to the extent he's not even on the team anymore. That didn't take long, by the way. They gave up on him rather quickly. He's a Brown now. He spent 1 year with the Jets.
Yeah.
He was a 3rd round pick, number 65 overall.
I don't think he was an Aaron Rodgers guy. I think that had something to do with it. He didn't drop the ball going into the end zone. Was that last year or the year before? Like there were signs.
Last year was his rookie year. They gave up on him after 1 year, Nick. That's my point.
You don't see that very often. Yeah.
And the new quarterback, all of this.
The silver lining here is you don't have to pick up a Jets receiver because we have so many other wide receiver injuries that there is opportunity elsewhere. I would just stay away from that Jets offense for now. Just a couple more notes on Broncos Jets, and then I promise we won't talk about the Jets for the full hour here. That was the 7th worst yards per play game in the NFL in the last 25 years. The Jets were at 1.4 yards per play. There have somehow been 6 worse offensive games than that. 10th lowest net yards in a game in the last 25 years. By the way, I looked at a full list of this. The Jets are responsible for 6 of the 30 worst net yardage games in the last 25 years. So what is that? 20% of the games are the Jets alone, which is crazy. And Denver on this season now responsible for the 2 worst offensive games of the year. Week 1, Tennessee, and then this past week against the New York Jets. The 2 least productive offensive games of the season have come against this Denver defense.
Denver has 30 sacks on the season already. Next highest is 20. So it's not all Jets, but it is a lot Jets with 9 of them, for crying out loud. Scott Cobe in the chat asks, do the Jets trade Breece Hall? They should. Let's explore it. They should be listening to all offers. It's going to take a while, and for the next Jets good team to be had. I'm surprised this has turned as sour as it has so quickly. I actually like the hire. I liked what they did this offseason. I knew that the offensive coordinator, the wide receiver room was an issue. But I actually liked Aaron Glenn as the head coach. Maybe getting a defensive first head coach was wrong, but I think it really is. You could see all along, like, this is going to be a high school offense in some ways, that they're going to be so run dependent. But man, it's just for it to go this sideways, for the shenanigans right before halftime, the fake punt with Breece Hall, and it actually worked, but only barely. Then not having a plan after that, seemingly, like, what's the point here? It's kind of, you could say that about the whole Jet season. What's the point here? But they should at least be exploring a trade.
Will they trade him? I would say probably not, just because these trades don't happen very often. Should they trade him? Absolutely. It would be very fun for the NFL for Breece Hall to end up with a real offense the rest of the season. I think there would certainly be teams interested, right? I mean,
Chargers,
Chargers, the Chiefs, the Houston Texans are the first ones who come to mind. Perhaps maybe not the Commanders. I don't know. Maybe they take a look at him. I think they like Krosky Merritt. Is there another obvious
Arizona?
One that I'm
Let's give them yet another ex-Jet.
Yeah,
I don't want to see him in Arizona. Michael Carter. Let's just add Breece Hall to complete the set.
Yeah, I'm not wishing for that by any means.
I wouldn't wish that on Breece Hall. Went to my high school, by the way, Wichita Northwest. Fun fact.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, teams will be calling on Breece Hall. I don't think it happens. To me, it's still more likely that Kamara would be traded, even though he says he doesn't want to be traded, which I believe him. But they did just sign him to an extension. There's just no way out really for the Jets right now. Like, this season is clearly gone, and I don't really know what you're building on, right? Like, I don't think Justin Fields is the guy. You have, like, how many for sure this guy's on the roster 3 years from now guys are on this team right now? Like Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, and that might be it.
Yeah. And I think the offensive linemen are good on this team. The 2 tackles, but man, it's a rough look for this team. And I'm surprised. And the funny thing is the defense has been bad all season. Wasn't bad against the Broncos. The Broncos are almost as equally culpable. Hey, they're that third down catch not happening. They're that away from losing that game with a game-winning field goal by Folk. I mean, that's how bad the Broncos played in this game.
Yeah, I know. And I know I said we won't talk about this game the whole show, and here we go. But yes, the Broncos probably should have lost. I mean, in the second half, here are the Broncos drives: 3-and-out punt, safety, 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, long field goal drive, 3-and-out punt. Like they did nothing really to contribute to this win. And again, to put a bow on this fantasy-wise, 2 players came out of this game with double-digit fantasy points. It was Bo Nix, who had like 12 or 13, and Nate Adkins, who caught the lone touchdown in this game. Like, it was a total fantasy disaster for everyone else.
Level of concern with Bo Nix, because he didn't play very well, and it's not the first time this year.
Level of concern as far as like, can he live up to his ADP? I think you have to be pretty concerned. He's QB 13 right now. He's really only had like 2+ games, I would say. Right. That's week 2 and week 4. I don't know. He's been fine on balance. You know, it's like if you were looking for Bo Nix to take this big step forward, that clearly has not happened. And you
drafted that for him,
right?
You paid that price in most leagues.
Well, I'm saying in fantasy or in real life, like he kind of seems like the same guy as last year, which is still fine. You know, that's a quarterback of a playoff team, but it doesn't feel like he is markedly better than he was a year ago.
He's not an automatic start. You know, when you look at I'm going to do my rankings later today, and he's going to be in that 10 to 20 range, I'm sure. And
he's behind Sam Darnold in fantasy points, and Sam Darnold was undrafted everywhere.
Exactly right. Okay, Puka Nacua gets hurt early in that game against the Ravens. Talk about another disappointing team. The Rams were really disappointing in this game. Yeah. They got 4. You know, what happens if the Ravens don't do those goal line shenanigans with Mark Andrews and the Mark Andrews push? I don't know. Back to back, and then Henry finally getting stuff. But I don't know. I think the Rams offensively had been fine prior to that point, but losing Puka, we'll see if he plays. There's been kind of conflicting reports. National reporters saying he'll miss some time. Sean McVay saying he's day-to-day. Sean McVay has a track record of really not divulging a whole lot. You know, I think you're going to have to find a replacement for him.
I think so too. Going to London this week and then the bye after that, I think it just makes too much sense to allow Puka to fully recover. You know, it's a guy with a long injury history already in his NFL career and dating back to college. Like, I just don't think you want to push this. And, you know, even maybe it costs you a loss against Jacksonville. That's a coin flip type of game to me, especially with the Jags' familiarity playing overseas relative to every other team. But I think you have to prioritize the long-term health of Puka Nacua. And that's part of the reason you brought in Davante Adams, because you probably anticipate Puka Nacua missing time at some point this season. And, you know, you're not just turning to, you know, this group of nobodies beyond those two. You still have a top flight guy in Davante Adams. You know, as far as the waiver wire goes, you know, if you need to maybe take a look at Tutu Atwell, if he's back, he didn't play this past week. Jordan Whittington would be the next man up. And, you know, Whittington is somebody I've had some interest in. You know, when Nacua and Adams are out there, the targets just aren't really going to be there. And even when Nacua went out against Baltimore, like the Rams, this was such a weird game. Like, really they deserved to win. They didn't really deserve to cover. I'll say that. I mean, the Ravens contributed so much to their own demise in this game. Like, I thought they had a real chance to steal it. You know, a disastrous first half for the Rams. This game had all the hallmarks of just one of those, oh boy, this is off the rails type of games. They miss a field goal. They fumble on their next drive. They're settling for field goals in the red zone. Then Nacua goes out, and it just felt like the wheels were coming off. But after the first quarter, the Ravens went out on downs, punt, out on downs, fumble, out on downs, out on downs. Still outgained the Rams 296 to 241 in this game. They won time of possession 38 minutes to 22. Like, the Ravens had the ball like the entire second half and did nothing.
Yeah, it really was wild seeing how poorly that they played offensively, and a lot of it is missing Puka, I think. And the Ravens are also playing poorly, switching quarterbacks. It was a tough watch, very tough watch all around. Not only just the goal line sequence, but late in the game, Huntley gets them down into the red zone. They get to a 4th and 10, and he throws it out of bounds under pressure. He
wasn't an upgrade over Cooper Rush. I get why they went away from Cooper Rush, because there's just no upside there. But this went about as expected for me offensively for the Ravens. Again, they were able to move the ball okay, and defensively actually played pretty well, right, relative to what we saw last week against Houston, where, you know, the Texans had their best offensive day in like 3 years. So I think there are some signs of fight in this Ravens team, but it's all about getting Lamar back, getting those pieces back. They're on bye this week, coming out of the bye. Bears, Dolphins, Vikings, Browns, Jets, Bengals, Steelers, Bengals. The path is there for the Ravens, but really can only afford 1 or 2 more slip-ups the rest of the way.
Let me ask you this. Ravens are on bye this week. You've got Puka Nacua. Rashad Bateman sitting there on your bench and has been very disappointing all year. You mentioned their better schedule coming back. Do you cut Rashad Bateman for Whittington, for Tutu Atwell, for some of these other guys that we're going to be talking about?
I'm probably fine with that. I mean, if you have to, yeah, like I'm not doing it if I'm not going to start one of those players. You know, if I have,
say you have Puka, you have Egbuka, you have Garrett
yeah,
Wilson, you need a starter.
Yeah, you're not cutting those guys, right? I mean, you know, maybe you
obviously, yeah,
maybe you're holding on to another quarterback. You know, if you have like a Trevor Lawrence or somebody on your bench, yeah, I'm fine. You can just cycle in that second quarterback spot. But it's Rashad Bateman. You know, he's a fringe roster guy in 12 teamers. Anyway.
I guess that was the question: is do you give up on Bateman? I think the answer
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. All right. Emeka Egbuka, you know, suffered the hamstring injury in the second quarter of the win over the Niners. He's unlikely to play this week. They've already said there's no Bucky Irving. No, there's going to be no Chris Godwin. We'll see if we get Mike Evans back. But Tampa is definitely a team we're going to mine for help. They get the extra day of rest. They play Monday night at Detroit. That rubs both ways. You know, we get the extra day of rest, but we have less information to base our decisions on, with many alternatives playing ahead of time on Sunday. I like Tez Johnson. I think Sterling Shepard is the quote unquote safe option. Yeah. I think he's the most likely to get targets among the receiving corps. You and I talked about Cade Otton a lot on the XM show today. Surely, you know, obviously I would look at Otton as a flex option, certainly as a tight end, but as a flex, I'd even still consider it.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of these injury situations with Puka, with Ridley, with Wilson, with Evans / Godwin / Egbuka, where somebody's going to step up, but it's not exactly clear who, and there might not be a ton of upside there. And this is the rare situation where I think Cade Otton might be the safest option. And if you have to, you know, especially if you're in a 3 wide receiver league with a flex, you know, maybe you throw him out there this week. He's coming off of 2 solid games in a row, 4 for 81 against Seattle, 5 for 51 against San Francisco, 11 total targets in those games. And, you know, keep in mind, there was a time last year when Evans and Godwin were both injured where we saw quite a bit of Cade Otton. There was an 8-game run, half the season, where he was averaging 6 catches for 56 yards on over 8 targets per game, was finding the end zone. I think this should be a pretty pass-friendly game for Tampa Bay going up against this super banged-up Detroit secondary. Brian Branch is suspended. I think, you know, the Buccaneers haven't really run the ball very well, very efficiently these last couple of games. That probably continues against Detroit. So even without all these weapons, and by the way, Mike Evans could play. We'll see. There's hope that he'll practice this week. I think there's a decent chance that he's out there. So maybe that changes things. But either way, I think the volume will be there. As far as those receivers go, I think you're right to point to Shepard as probably the highest floor option. Tez Johnson, probably the highest ceiling, because he's the one who you might only see 4 or 5 targets, but 2 of those could be 40-yard gains. And then Cameron Johnson, you know, among those wide receivers, actually led in targets this past week, but it was only 4. You know, Tez had 2, 3 for Sterling Shepard. So it kind of hard to know what to take away from that game, especially because Emeka Egbuka wasn't even doing anything before he got hurt. He had a terrible first half. I think he was like 2 for 17 and then ended up going out.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, I have a team with Egbuka and Cortland Sutton. Yeah, I lost this week. You know, it's tough. Yeah, it happens. Yeah. So it goes. But I think that, and the thing is, it's a great matchup against the Detroit Lions secondary, which is all banged up. Yes, you have to deal with the Detroit pass rush, but this should be a total shootout potential. Yeah. You know, no Brian Branch suspended for this game because he's a dummy. You know, there was, or at least he lost his mind for a minute. I'll give him a minute more credit than that. Maybe he's not a dummy, but maybe he just, you know, that was really a really poor decision to do that there, especially considering what's at stake for the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions are 28th right now in terms of fantasy points given up to wide receivers. Yeah. So even when they've been healthier, it's still been a pass-friendly defense. And, you know, part of that is they played with some leads and seen high volume. But the thing with Baker and Tampa Bay right now, and we've seen this for 2+ years, is like, even when guys are out, like, they don't change their offense. They don't just turtle up and start going conservative. Like, all those receivers that we just mentioned were making big plays last week against San Francisco. So I think it's just kind of business as usual. There aren't many teams in the NFL that I would say that about, but I think Baker goes in with the same amount of confidence, whether he has Egbuka, Evans, and Godwin, or Tez Johnson, Cameron Johnson, and Sterling Shepard.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. So I'm all over those guys. I think that's the sort of neighborhood we're going to be shopping in the NFFC for sure. When we're trying to find those guys, 16% rostered in the NFFC primetime, 9% in the online championship for Tez Johnson. It's a little higher for Shepard. It's lower for Cameron Johnson. But yeah, I think it's a good time That's one of the areas where you have to be looking to pick up guys. You and I did sneaky ads yesterday, and man, it was not easy. And we know there's a definite need, and that's the worst part. There's plenty of need and not enough inventory. It's the worst combo.
Yep, you're right about that. Got some interesting questions popping off in the chat here, by the way. Some trade questions and just kind of some general thoughts on the Nacua situation. There was a Rashee Rice question in here that I'm not seeing anymore.
Robs is asking Josh Allen and Gibbs for Robinson, AJ, and Rice. If that's Bijan, hell yeah. I mean, I understand maybe in a super flex league you don't want to do that, trade a quarterback. No, single flex, he says. So I think that's a pretty heavy yes, and you get the added bonus this week with Allen being on bye. So yeah, I would definitely do that.
And this is the one I was looking for here too. Devontae Adams for Rashee Rice. A little bit complicated because of the unknown with Puka Nacua, but I don't think we're looking at like a long-term absence for Nacua. I personally don't think he plays this week. Maybe he does. Maybe it is, just a minor type of injury. I'm extremely high on Rashee Rice rest of season. Patrick Mahomes is already the number one fantasy quarterback. This Chiefs team is scoring points. They're looking a lot more explosive than they were at any point last year. This team, they didn't score more than 30 points until the AFC Championship game last year. And, they've done that now 2 of the last 3 weeks, put up 27 in that Jacksonville game. I would get my hands on Rashee Rice here if I can do that.
Yeah. I'm ready to deploy my Rashee Rice shares. That's for sure. Looking forward to that. And you're right. Kansas City looks really good. We talked about this earlier too. They're 3-3, and yet I think they may be the best team in the NFL. Or at least they're have a seat at the table. I'm not down on Detroit despite their defensive issues in the secondary.
No, they're fine.
They're a wagon, and when you put them at home, they're going to roll over a lot of teams. So I'm still feeling pretty good about Detroit as well. All right, we're going to take care of quick little business. You're going to hear from Circa and also from Megasports Pro. First from Circa, it's football season, and the best place to catch the games is at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. Stadium Swim has 3 levels, 6 pools, and 143-foot diagonal screen. Whether it's Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. No matter the size of your group, Stadium Swim is the place for you. From owner suites to cabanas, daybeds to stadium booths, there are seating choices for everyone. And the best part, Stadium Swim is open 365 days a year. With temperature-controlled pools, it's a great place to catch the games all season long. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Book today at circalasvegas.com. We are also brought to you by the folks at Megasports Progressive. Elevate your game with the ultimate sports contest, Megasports Progressive. Dive into a world of excitement with 3 progressive jackpots and a chance to win big every week and every month. We're rewarding 1,500 lucky winners, distributing over $50,000 in monthly prizes. All you do is answer 15 daily sports props. Add up your correct responses for the week's cash prizes and tally the week's totals for huge monthly cash rewards. Megasports Pro makes it fun and easy to join. This is a thrilling opportunity to be part of our growing community of sports enthusiasts. Sign up today and unlock a chance to win big every day, every week, and every month. Sign up is free, no commitments, no credit cards. Your first 9 days of play are free. Visit Megasportspro.com today. Let's talk a little bit about the Arizona Cardinals and Indianapolis Colts. This is a fun, entertaining game. Yeah. More entertainment than I think we thought we had coming into this game. Both teams are, had some guys missing here and there. The Colts lost a player in warmups due to a concussion. Anthony Richardson lost the battle to a resistance band badly enough that he's on IR. What the heck is going on here?
Look, I've always been somebody who's been skeptical of resistance bands for this exact reason. Every time you're using them, you're like, I don't know. The sync team's a little thin. And, prayers up for Anthony Richardson, who sounds like he took a shot to the eye. Usually when something weird like that happens pregame, you start to have some doubts about your pick. I got the Colts at 6.5, and I was feeling great about it. Line moved all the way to 9 with the news that Kyler wasn't playing. And I think deep down, you kind of had this sneaking suspicion of is Kyler being out really that big of a deal? Jacoby Brissett, he was bad last year, but he has a long history of being a capable fill-in. And that's exactly what he was. He made this game very, very interesting all the way to the end. this is one that I consumed mostly via red zone. And it felt like every time it flashed to this game, it's like, how are the Cardinals at the 25-yard line of the Colts once again? Like all they did was move the ball 9 of 14 on third downs, 400 yards of total offense. Jacoby Brissett throws for 320 and 2 touchdowns. I'm sure everybody's seen the stat by now that Kyler Murray last did that in 2022 as far as meeting the yardage and the touchdowns, and did a lot of that without Marvin Harrison Jr. Exited this game early on with a concussion. So we saw a lot of Zay Jones, a lot of Michael Wilson. That's another wide receiver injury to monitor this week. We'll see if he's able to clear protocol. Led to Trey McBride being targeted 11 times. We like to see that. Amari DiMercado ended up getting hurt early on, just 3 snaps for him. So a lot of Bam Knight, Jeff. He ended up out-snapping Michael Carter, out-carried him 11-9. And we saw Bam Knight get all 4 of the goal line carries for Arizona.
Yeah, and we had the Adam Schefter tweet about an hour, 20 minutes before the game that Knight was going to be the starter. And so we had to scramble there. Or in many cases, just a bench Michael Carter because it is too late to pick up Knight. Knight's available in a lot of leagues this week. Can I interest you in some Bam Knight?
If you're in a desperation spot, sure. No Derrick Henry, no James Cook with the buys this week. So yeah, I think you at least take a look. Cardinals are facing a really good run defense, the best run defense in the NFL by some metrics in the Green Bay Packers. So it's not a great matchup. Like you essentially will need a touchdown for that to pay any sort of dividends. So I would be a little bit cautious about that, but yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly how much time, Trey Benson is going to miss. There could be a multi-game run here where you get something out of Bam Knight. So I'm ultimately okay with that. Not a whole lot for me on the Colts side of this game. Another really productive day for Jonathan Taylor. That's just par for the course at this point. And Tyler Warren, finishes 6 for 63 with a touchdown. Did most of that on the first drive of the game. 4 targets on that first drive, 3 for 37 in the opening touchdown. So he continues to be one of the cheat codes in fantasy.
Yeah, he had only 4 targets the week before against Vegas, a little concerning, but that was also an uber blowout too. So that's kind of have to take that with the appropriate grain of salt. I think he's the one bankable pass catcher on the team. They're all good pass catchers. That's the thing. Pittman's a good player, but he got 3 targets. Alec Pierce had 2 catches for 48 yards. The 2 catches, though, were a thing of beauty.
That's every week for him.
Yeah. And Josh Downs is very effective. They established Downs early in that game, and then Downs caught his first touchdown of the year. He's almost never targeted in the red zone. Made a great catch, took a big hit in the end zone. I'm hoping this leads to a little bit more for Josh Downs. I really like Josh Downs this game.
The Colts remind me so much of the Packers with their pass catchers.
Yeah,
Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft, and then this like Pierce, Downs, Pittman combination is a little, Dobbs, Reed, Matthew Golden. I mean, the Packers have even more names, I guess, that we have to worry about, especially with Christian Watson coming back soon. But yeah, it's tough for fantasy because Warren is really the only guy I think that you're like truly comfortable locking in every week. It looked like Pittman maybe was going to have that resurgence early on, and he's been better than he was and healthier than he was last season. But they have 3 really viable options there. And, even A.D. Mitchell made some plays a couple weeks ago. We know what he did at the end of one of those plays, and he's been kind of in the doghouse ever since. But
got scratched.
You got a high 2nd round pick, just like not even playing for you.
Yeah. They punished him, and they, with only like 8 offensive snaps against the Raiders. And they said, you know what, that's not harsh enough. You're scratched now. Well, and Downs is back. Pierce is back. Pierce had missed 2 games to the concussion. Yeah. The thing about Pierce is they send him over the middle. They have him making those like stretch plays. He's vulnerable to hits like that too. Yeah. Harrison Jr., if Harrison Jr. is out, would you pick up Zay Jones this week or Michael Wilson?
Yeah, I would. I guess I'm a little more interested in Michael Wilson just because he's been like the long time number 2. He's never really done anything with that. Was targeted 5 times in this game, played 55 snaps. But Zay Jones led the Cardinals in snaps, played 58 out of 73 and was targeted 7 times. So part of it, of course, depends on if Kyler Murray is back. If Kyler's back, I feel worse, I think, about the passing game.
Yes.
Maybe. Yes. I don't want to pile on Kyler too much. Like, obviously, what he can do to extend plays is not something that Jacoby Brissett can do, and maybe that's more valuable specifically against Green Bay with Micah Parsons in that pass rush. But I think I feel better about the wide receiver productivity with Brissett than I do Kyler, because we've talked about this. Like Kyler, I think he's still dead last in the NFL in terms of frequency of targets to wide receivers. They're really, really dependent on throwing to the tight end and even throw into running backs.
Yeah. Let's talk Niners. You want to talk about another team? We talked about the Bucs side of that game a little bit there. We didn't really talk about the Niners side. First of all, Juwan Jennings after the game said he had 5 broken ribs among his other injuries he's dealing with there. He's Franken receiver at this point in time. Kendrick Bourne, another big yardage game. I think he's earned a place in the Rota, but does he do that with Brock Purdy? If Purdy plays this week instead of Jones?
Yeah, I know. Another just huge question mark for San Francisco as these continue to mount. The Fred Warner injury is just that might be the one that kind of breaks the camel's back. It's just going to be so tough to overcome that. Yeah, we talked about Kendrick Bourne last week, man, and it felt like a flash in the pan against the Rams, and he comes back with almost as good of a game this past week, 5 for 142, ripping off big plays. Like he passes the eye test too. There are some of these fill-in receivers who you just, you kind of catch a lucky break. You might hit a big play. Like Kendrick Bourne looks like a legitimate starting NFL receiver. So I'm still in on him. Tonjes played well, 6 for 58. And, the Niners, for as great as McCaffrey has been in full PPR leagues, they're not able to run the ball. Like this is every single week. You see the volume and it just doesn't really amount to anything. 17 for 54. And, Mac Jones, despite throwing 2 really bad interceptions, got fooled on both of those by some disguised coverages. Still threw the ball 39 times. Like that is, I think, going to continue to be the script for the Niners.
I think so too. I think they're going to throw as much as they can to McCaffrey, and then they'll try to hit some shot plays to Bourne, and keep rolling with that there. McCaffrey, he's getting all the fantasy points. He's getting all those sweet receptions, quote unquote, only 7 last week on 8 targets, but still, you are still getting 6.5 reception props last week there for McCaffrey. That line has been getting tighter and tighter. They face the Falcons this upcoming week, and the Falcons sneakily have been pretty good against running backs. McCaffrey is a different class. He's a pass catcher first, then a running back. So I expect he'll struggle to run the ball, but I think he's going to get targeted a ton.
Yeah, I mean that's just automatic at this point. It feels like 7, 8, 9 targets is like the floor for McCaffrey these days.
Yep. I think I would take Bourne ahead of all these other receivers that we've talked about so far. I take him over the Tampa guys. I take him over the Rams replacements. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, they are saying that Ricky Pearsall could be back at practice on Wednesday. So if Pearsall and Jennings, even this version of Jennings, are out there, that becomes a little bit difficult. But I don't know if you could trust Juwan Jennings to really do anything if he's truly playing through 5 broken ribs. Like, yeah, he was out there against Tampa Bay, played 76% of the snaps, drew 3 targets, caught 1 for 7 yards. Like I think this version of Juwan Jennings is so banged up that Kendrick Bourne probably leapfrogs him. And yeah, I trust the infrastructure for the Niners to find ways to scheme him open, more than I would the Cardinals, more than I would someone like Van Jefferson, for the Titans, or trying to spin the wheel on the Buccaneers guys. Also thought it was interesting that Jennings came out and said that, playing through broken ribs. And then Trent Williams comes out and is like, too bad, deal with it. Why are you talking about this? Like, shut up.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, everybody's hurt, bro. Yeah, that sort of thing. There was a moment too where Shanahan was yelling at Jennings on the sideline.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that was pretty funny there. So yeah, they face Atlanta. Atlanta obviously flying high after that win. I didn't mean to make a Falcons pun, but there we go. With the big win over Buffalo, and the defense was a big part of that there. 14 sacks on the season, a lot of pressures.
Yep.
They got to Josh Allen last night. The Bills had their own share of issues as far as that injury issues and just receivers not getting open. But I feel like we're getting in this Atlanta whipsaw again. We expect good things out of them. They let us down. They're underdogs. Well, they have some fight in them.
Yeah, that was a really impressive game. Really impressive first half, I should say, for the Falcons, who I believe they had 335 yards of offense in the first half and should have been up 28-7. Drake London steps out of bounds at the 1-yard line. And that proved to be a big deal because Atlanta did everything it could to try to hand this game to Buffalo in the second half. Had a field goal blocked, had a couple of drives that stalled out. Like, this was very much on the table for Buffalo to storm back and steal this game. And it wasn't the Falcons offense. Penix made some nice plays, but it really did most of his work in the first half. Same with Robinson. But the Falcons defense won them this game. Back-to-back 3-and-outs in the fourth quarter for the Bills when they had a chance to go down and tie the game. And you don't see that very often, man. You really don't. And right. I know this version of the Bills doesn't seem quite as dominant maybe as we expected, but I think this is still a feather in the cap type of game for the Falcons offense, which top 5 now in EPA per play. They're top 10 in success rate, 4th in the NFL in terms of EPA per pass. And that seems to show up every week unless they're playing the Carolina Panthers on the road. Like this is a really, really good defense. And what, like, the Falcons lose that game every single time in years past, right? Like when you're giving a team like the Bills that many opportunities, they would have found a way to blow it. That's just what the Falcons do. And to see them slam the door shut, and like you mentioned, some of those pressures on Josh Allen, like there was a play where he was sacked and couldn't even get out of it. Like how many times do you see Josh Allen wiggle his way out, extend the play, whip something downfield? Like he had no choice but to give up. And like the refs just let the defender kind of hang on to him for a couple seconds before blowing the whistle. Like you're so used to Josh Allen avoiding those. And over last night, Atlanta was able to get to him.
Was that the bear hug sack?
He didn't even go down. He just kind of gave himself up. Yeah,
that's right. There was the other one too, where he kind of fumbled going backwards too. That was like he just got smothered. He had no chance on that. There was the 4th down play where he's scrambling to his left and does that silly little flick thing because, hey, it's worked before, and falls pathetically short. Seems like an unnecessary flick. It wasn't like someone was hanging on to him. He was afraid maybe someone was trying to do it or something, I guess. That's all I can think of. But, there was some weird plays going on there. Palmer got hurt early.
Yeah, after a big play.
Yeah. So, and I don't think they used James Cook enough in this game. I think that's something they'll have to revisit because this is a couple weeks in a row after Cook got off to that awesome start to the season. We're all kind of patting ourselves on the back for taking him in the 3rd round. He's RB1 for a couple of those weeks. The last couple of weeks, not so much. And, New England clearly designed their defense to take Cook out of it a little bit. Falcons seemed like they did a little bit of that too. He got some yards in the second half, but they kind of went away from that too at the end.
Yeah, they did. I think they got a little too pass happy, but you're in kind of this semi-desperation spot where nothing's working. You got to put a score on the board. And, really it was 3rd and 4th downs where, the Bills were moving it okay. It wasn't a great offensive game by any means for Buffalo, but they were 2 of 10 on 3rd and 4th downs. Like so many semi-promising drives just ended abruptly and ultimately just kind of ran out of time. Should mention, massive fantasy games for both Bijan Robinson and Drake London. London just completely bailed me out in a league where I had Harrison, Egbuka, and Jahmyr Gibbs. And, it's one of those where you're going in with like a 7% chance to win. You're like, well, there's no way I'm getting 30 out of Drake London. And then he basically gets there in the first half. Yeah,
I think I told you yesterday I had a team that had 60 points going into Monday night. Well, Bijan and Caleb Williams took care of that. So it's funny how that can turn in a hurry there. We'll talk a little bit about the Bears and Commanders coming up next. But first, note from our friends over at Chalkboard. Cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player's stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. $20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. Now available in 30 plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to get $20 free with no deposit required. Again, that's Chalkboard. Download the app today. Also, we're on the BlueWire Network. Here are their ads. All right. Jeff Erickson and Nick Whalen here. Welcome back to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast and live stream. Nick, you were an angry young man today when talking about the Commanders and Bears. Have you simmered down a little bit? You feeling any better about this one, or is it still sting?
I'm feeling a little bit better. I was in a bad spot psychologically last night. Had a lot of things tied into the Commanders. Winning this game straight up. The Commanders covering 4.5. But really, the issue is that this was going on concurrently with the Milwaukee Brewers and the Bryce Terang egregious worst at bat of the MLB season, and then the Jaden Daniels fumble happened within like 10 seconds of each other in real time. After that, I just sat on the couch. All my TVs were off. Wasn't even looking at my phone. I was just sitting in solitude for like 20 minutes, kind of realizing what could have been a great sports night turned into a disaster. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this game, man. I was totally wrong on this. I thought it would be a really good spot for the Commanders to get the running game going. I loved all the overs for Ja'Cory Krosky-Barrett, had the over 61.5 rushing yards, finished at 61, probably would have gone over if they don't fumble on that play late in the fourth quarter. And, I did not necessarily think the Chicago Bears defense was going to generate 3 turnovers, right? And, rainy game, but you're thinking, if anything, that probably affects the more inexperienced team, the road team, and Washington coming out with an interception and a fumble immediately, and then obviously the fumble that lost the game late. That was the big swing. But even with that, like, even if you say, yeah, those are some lucky turnovers, I don't know if I'd be comfortable saying Washington should have won this game. Like, the Bears pounded them. I thought offensively, put up 381 yards, 6.5 yards per play. Washington was at 5.5. This was probably the best game for DeAndre Swift of the season, maybe in a Bears uniform. Caleb Williams, as usual, you have your qualms with some of the third down throws, but he doesn't turn the ball over. We can say what we want about Caleb Williams. He's done an excellent job of taking care of the ball, took only 3 sacks last night. And this was a pretty impressive effort to me from the Bears, who I thought would be able to throw on Washington. They really weren't. They won this game on the ground.
Yeah. And maybe the conditions had something to do with that there. We saw the late fumble was definitely an issue because of the wet ball.
Sure.
And, maybe some of the there could have been some missed throws because of that. Maybe they chose not to throw as much. Well, hey, when DeAndre Swift is running through the opposing defense, why throw?
Yeah.
Uncle Ted mentions that Williams did get drilled hard on that play on the sideline very late in the game.
Yeah.
Took one for the team basically on that one there. But yeah, the overturned touchdown, it changed a lot of fantasy days on a really borderline call about the left tackle not covering the line properly there. I thought that was kind of sketch. I thought that should have been a touchdown that should have stood with him and Rome Odunze. That certainly hurt Rome's line this week. He was another wide receiver that should have had a better day. DJ Moore got hurt in this game, but we didn't realize it until after, because he was on the field on the last play from scrimmage on this game. Ended up spending the night in the hospital. So, we're watching to see that might be another wide receiver that we're down this upcoming week. Bears facing New Orleans at home.
Yeah, where are you at on the Bears right now? Because I think with the bye week, you kind of set the Bears aside for a week, but they've won 3 in a row. They beat Dallas, the Raiders, and now the Commanders. I think the Commanders win is the signature one of that group, but they're 5.5 point home favorites. That's the biggest favorite they've been since week 10 of last season. That's when they played New England, lost that game 19-3 straight up. But if they win this game, if they move to 4-2, I know the resume is not all that impressive, but do you look at the Bears as a potential wild card team, or are we still a year away?
Yeah, I do. I think it's their misfortune that they're in the NFC because I think the better teams are in the NFC right now, especially with all the quarterback injuries in the AFC and how that narrative has changed in a hurry, by the way, about the relative conference strengths. But I think they're viable, and I think they'll have a schedule that kind of could be worse if they were one of the better teams in the division. Certainly the NFC North drew a tough schedule, but maybe they play. Actually, they didn't, because they're playing the AFC North this year, and the AFC North isn't as strong as we thought it was going to be. So maybe they'll be fine with that. And they got the Raiders, and they looked so unimpressive in the win over the Raiders. Just there, but for the grace of a blocked field goal, go them. I mean, that's the thing that's so tricky about it, trying to evaluate them. They look awful against the Lions, obviously. They looked good for 2/3 of the game against the Vikings and miserable in that last third of that game. They're one of those teams in the middle, and I think they could catch hot and make a wild card appearance. I think we've seen development out of Caleb Williams.
Yeah,
I think I've seen what some of the things I needed to see there. The defense was better last night than it's been all season. If that's something that's real and not just a function of the Commanders missing people and the rain and whatever, if it's something that's bankable, then great. I mean, they get a chance to go to 4-2 at the home game against the Saints this week. Puts them in a decent spot.
Yeah, it's a big prove it game, I think, for Chicago. If you're a real wild card contender, you beat the Saints at home, and
you beat them comfortably.
Yeah, well, I think if the Bears just win that game, you're fine, because this is the type of game in years past where there's always been like that shred of Bears optimism, like they'll win 2 in a row, and it's like maybe, and then they fall flat, like I mentioned that New England game last year. Like this is one where if you take care of business, you're 4-2. The Ravens look beatable. You get the Bengals and the Giants after that. Can you win 2 of those maybe? And then all of a sudden you're on course. I think at the very least the Bears are a tough out. Like if you're even late in the season, like they play the Eagles, they play the Packers twice, the Niners, the Lions again. like those, they're not a pushover, right? Like I would be surprised if they have too many more games like week 2 where it's just, over after a quarter and a half. And, to bounce back from where they were, like that just horrible, devastating loss, and then you get smacked by Detroit. I feel a lot better about the Bears going forward. I think they're still probably, I would still be surprised if they make the playoffs. Just because I think you're probably going to have to get to 10 wins. I don't know if they get there. But you're right about Caleb Williams. Like he's playing more of the Ben Johnson style. I think it's going to take a long time to kind of get the Caleb Williams-ness out of him if they want to turn him into a true Ben Johnson quarterback, but he's at least making a concerted effort.
Yep. Agreed. It's also the Dennis Allen Revenge Bowl this week. Defensive coordinator for the Bears going up against the Saints. On the other side of that equation, the Commanders face the Cowboys. I saw a note on Twitter as we were talking that Jerry Jones says there's a good chance CeeDee Lamb comes back this week.
Yep.
Week 7. It never gets less weird for me that Jerry Jones is giving injury reports every week. I still think that's one of the silliest things about the NFL, but here we are. Well, thoughts on both the Commanders and the Cowboys here?
Big time stay away for me, because I think we're going to see a ton of points. The total's up to 55.5 at some books. That will be, I believe, our highest total of the season, and might stand the rest of the year. We'll see where that ultimately settles. If CeeDee Lamb is back, I probably give a slight edge to the Cowboys at home, just because like the way to beat the Commanders so far this season has been to throw over the top. They gave up a ton of big plays through the air, and now it's like, now you're wondering about the run defense on top of that. Dallas could kind of do both. They could certainly beat you through the air. The running game has been good so far this season. And, I think right now we might have more injury question marks for Washington than we do Dallas, which is saying a lot, because we have plenty of question marks for the Cowboys. But yeah, if McLaurin's not out there, I think that's a real hindrance. I know McCaffrey looked good last night. Debo didn't really give you anything. But I came out of this game really, really discouraged by the Commanders. Some uncharacteristic mistakes, just bad tackling all over the place. Like Dallas is the worst defense in the NFL. Like the Commanders will have success offensively, but I'm a little worried about the Commanders defense in this spot.
Yeah. So, but again, going back to the wide receiver carnage, if Terry McLaurin doesn't play, which Commanders receiver are you considering picking up, because it's such a great matchup against the Cowboys?
That's a good question. I mean, we saw multiple guys contribute last night. Probably McCaffrey for me. I know he didn't, do a ton in terms of volume, and that's always kind of the case for Washington. They're even like McLaurin last year. It's not like he was being force fed 15 targets a game. Right. He was just really efficient on those. I think there's some trust there with McCaffrey. Tends to make difficult catches. I mean, who are your other options here? Jalen Lane.
Yeah.
Debo. If McLaurin's out, Debo's definitely a start. We'll see on Noah Brown. But yeah, I think I would take a chance on McCaffrey going up against Dallas. I mean, the numbers are just overwhelming at this point for that Dallas defense.
Chris Moore got more targets, I think, than anybody else.
Yeah, had a big play.
Had a touchdown. Nice touchdown, by the way. But it was one of those games. McCaffrey scores, Jalen Lane scores, and Moore scores. Or no, Lane didn't score. He had one big catch. I take that back. But Ertz got back involved a little bit. Ertz is someone I'd consider maybe using as a flex this week. We were talking about with Otten. I think Ertz is in that category too. Yeah,
for sure. And you are right. I mean, Chris Moore was the guy who was out there the most often outside of Debo. 44 snaps out of a possible 65, ran 27 routes. So if you just want to take that data, then maybe you give Chris Moore a slight edge over McCaffrey, but that's going to be a little chancy.
That's a desperation stream, but I might just.
I think given the matchup, I don't hate that.
Yeah, I don't either. The Tennessee Titans answered the question about which team was going to fire their coach first. They have fired Brian Callahan, not into the sun, just from his job. But it was not a shock. Maybe a little bit on the timing, but there was nothing from that Raiders game that left you encouraged. Calvin Ridley got hurt in this game too, to screw over fantasy managers one more time. But yeah, what can we learn from the Tennessee Titans?
Not much. I think there's hope that, was there a single Brian Callahan supporter out there? I don't think there was,
I think his dad, the nepotism hire. Maybe possibly. Zach Taylor too. Who knows? Yeah,
it can't get any worse. I think you hope that you get some sort of dead cat bounce here. You get the new interim bounce that you see sometimes, but I don't know, man. I don't know. In terms of the waiver wire, it's like if Calvin Ridley's out, maybe you take a look at Van Jefferson. Maybe Aya Minor is out there. in some shallower leagues. 6 targets for Van Jefferson, 34 routes. The Titans are going to continue to throw with volume because they're always going to be trailing. You get a Patriots team that's red hot coming into this game. I still have a little bit of interest in Tajay Spears. Only 5 carries this past week, but ended up outsnapping Tony Pollard. Saw a decent amount of targets. There's just not much here. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts. This game played out exactly like you would expect.
Yes, the people that were cagey enough to take the Raiders and Survivor, this was a perfect script for them. Yeah. This game was rarely in doubt. They got once it got to 10-3, it was like, okay, it's over. Or
Titans just kept turning it over. They actually had opportunities to cover this game, and it was just an interception and 2 fumbles by Cam Ward. Titans offensive line is terrible.
All the sacks again.
Yeah. Only thing I'll say on the Raiders is that they still can't run the ball. This is a horrible rushing offense. 23 carries, 75 yards for Ashton Genty. Did give you a touchdown. Still not doing a whole lot as a pass catcher. Unless they are playing, I think it was the Chicago Bears where he went off, right? Unless they're playing the Bears, there's been no hope. The volume at least is there. You're meeting a baseline with Genty, but I don't see that getting a whole lot better as a 11.5 point underdog at KC this week.
Yeah, possibly climbing. We'll see about that. All right, we're at that point of the show. It's time to empty Nick's notebook, Nick's fantasy notebook. What else you got here for us, Nick, before we get on out of here?
There's quite a few games that we haven't hit, so I'll just kind of go down the line here. Seahawks, Jags, a pretty ugly game for Jacksonville. Jags punted 8 times. They converted 4 of 16 third downs. Neither team was actually good on third down. Seattle probably should have ran away with this game. They went 1 of 12 on third down, so 5 of 28 combined for this one. Brian Thomas Jr. Had a nice first half, kind of woke up, should have had that other touchdown if Travis Hunter wasn't lined up offsides. Either way, kind of a fluky play. Also had a huge drop later in the game, and another route where he was going over the middle was open and stopped running, much like we saw earlier in the season. So I don't know that we're fully past that for Brian Thomas. Deep league note, Hunter Long was the guy at tight end for the Jags. Brenton Strange is on IR. 3 targets, 59 snaps for Hunter Long. Had a bad drop late in the game. He's so much worse than Brenton Strange, but he is going to be on the field for the Jags. JSN had his best fantasy day of the season. If Puka Nacua doesn't play this week, he'll overtake him as the wide receiver 1 on the year. He was well over 100 yards early in the second quarter. Had a long catch and run on just a perfect throw from Sam Darnold. AJ Barner, who we talked a little bit about last week, had a long catch and run, finished 3 for 71. I think he continues to be viable in deeper leagues. Jaguars, once again, penalized a ton, 10 penalties, 76 yards. Offensive line was just horrible. I've seen the number as high as 39 as far as total pressures on Trevor Lawrence. That's a generational pressure game for Seattle. So some concerns for the Jags heading to London. Bengals Packers. I feel like you got to have some thoughts here, right?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
I was all over Bengals plus 14.5. This is, there are a lot of games I was wrong about. This is one that played out exactly like I thought it would. Packers win comfortably. They were never really in danger of losing the game, but the Packers just don't run away from teams. They were giving up these long drives in the second half, didn't run that many plays. Once again, a really efficient offensive game for Green Bay where you're like, they didn't really play that well. 6.8 yards per play. Josh Jacobs was good. Another good game for him as a receiver, by the way, 5 for 57 through the air. But ultimately a low volume passing game for Green Bay. And I will cede the floor to you to give your thoughts on Joe Flacco.
Yes. And I got to mention, this is the first time where both the Jaguars and Bengals played, and we refrained till after the 50-minute mark before mentioning their existence. So maybe because we're beaten down after this past week, that might have something to do with it. We'll see. First half, the Packers outgained the Bengals 240-65, yet it was only 10-0. Yeah. Evan McPherson made a 67-yard field goal, but the Packers had iced him just before the kick. It had been one of those kicks that went off the crossbar and then in. Crazy good kick. Then he missed the subsequent re-kick. But, the note will say that McPherson was 1 of 3 in field goal chances. He missed a 67 and a 57 at the very end just to get it within 1 score so they could try to get the onside kick. All that said, I came away reasonably encouraged by the second half by the Bengals in some ways. They moved the ball. They really did. First drive of the third quarter was a 10-minute drive where they scored a touchdown, got it to 10-7. The problem was they couldn't get off the field defensively, couldn't get the stop. The Packers had a 5+ minute drive of their own right after that. I thought that I was impressed with Matthew Golden. This was the first time they really got him involved, I thought, on a regular basis. Helps to be going against the Bengals secondary. I saw more of Samaje Perine than I thought I'd want to or expect to, but it actually kind of fit a little bit more. So it is problem time for Chase Brown managers there. I still don't think he's in cut land, Nick, but it's also bench time though. It's
been bench time.
Yeah, it is. It has been, and it is. The Bengals lost Gesicki in this game. They also lost Tanner Hudson to a concussion. Hudson actually scored in this game. So I think Noah Fant might be a play on Thursday night against the Steelers because Flacco does like throwing a tight end. So I think Fant will be a little bit more involved. If you're looking for a tight end stream, I'd consider going that way there. On defense, the Bengals subbed out Owen Wilson for a rookie linebacker, 4th-round pick out of Clemson. So Wilson was a guy that you drafted in IDP leagues. Don't use him anymore. He's not getting that many snaps.
No IDP notes for me. Although Lucas Van Ness did get hurt and sounds like he's going to miss some time. So that's no Van Ness and no Devontae Wyatt likely for this week against Arizona. Chargers Dolphins, not a whole lot here. I think we should mention Kimani Vidal was the answer. Not Hassan Haskins. Outcarried Haskins 18-6, finished with 124 yards plus a receiving touchdown. No Quentin Johnston, so we saw more from Ladd McConkey, 7 for 100 and a touchdown. Had an excellent catch and run, just terrible tackling by Miami late in the game to set up an easy field goal. Aronde Gadsden, 7 for 68. Definitely a name to keep an eye on the waiver wire as far as tight ends go. I still was not really impressed with the Chargers. Just they go 2-3 quarters just slogging their way through games. They didn't score a touchdown until the third quarter. They were trailing at halftime. They blew a 10-point lead for the second straight week. We're very lucky to escape that game.
Yeah.
Browns Steelers.
Oh, hold on. I got a couple things to say about Miami and Chargers actually here too. Okay. Gadsden lost a fumble in that game and they still kept going to him afterwards. So that to me was kind of interesting because that could, Achane scored the next play after the Gadsden fumble. So the fact that they were willing to go back to him when it mattered later, like seeing that. 155 to -11 in the third quarter in terms of yards for the Chargers versus the Dolphins. And then they just turned the off switch there. The Chargers actually looked really good in the third quarter. Vidal was gashing them. Herbert was finding people. And then they pulled off the game-winning drive too. Let's not forget that. That they got it back when they needed to, but the defense is a concern now all of a sudden for the Chargers. The offense, I think they just benefited from playing Miami. I'm really interested to see what happens against the Colts this week.
I like the Colts as a road dog in that one. I do. I think the Colts have just been way more consistent. And they have some problems on defense too. Gave up a lot of yardage to Arizona. So, it should be a back and forth game, but I have my questions about the Chargers that 3-0 start. I mean, they look so dominant early on and just haven't really looked like the same team. I think the last game that we haven't hit is Browns Steelers. Not a lot here. I don't understand why they had Dylan Gabriel throw the ball 52 times. Like I know you're trailing, but they weren't really trailing by that much until late in the game. And I thought this has got to be a spot where you make the Steelers stop Quinshon Judkins. And he only carried 12 times. Again, 52 attempts for Dylan Gabriel. 29 of those traveled 5 yards or fewer past the line of scrimmage. You would think when you're throwing it 52 times, like, all right, there's got to be some fantasy here. Harold Fannin goes 7 for 81. I guess that was like the best thing that came out of this. He had a big drop late. So did David Njoku. Thought Aaron Rodgers, they continue to play this very conservative, limited offensive game, but had a couple of vintage throws, a couple of really nice ones to DK Metcalf, a great, scramble, extending the play, directing traffic throw to Connor Hayward for a touchdown in a tight window. But I do think we return to the high volume Quinshon Judkins offense this week. The Browns are home favorites, 3-point home favorites for the worst run defense in football in the Miami Dolphins. This should be a 20+ carry day.
If Judkins isn't in your DFS lineup, it's only because you're trying to be contrarian. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, he's going to be very popular. There's no question about that.
David Njoku got hurt in this game. He's also subject to trade rumors. Those things kind of are mutually exclusive. They don't help each other there. So there's something to watch for that. Does this team become more interesting if they try to trot out Shedeur or Sanders at some point in time?
More interesting, yes. Better, I don't know. I think we're going to see him at some point.
I think so too.
I don't know when that point will be, but Gabriel, I guess the one positive you could say is that he's not turning the ball over. And I think that's kind of what they're asking of him. So many short passes, just trying to break something, but it's just not working. Maybe it works against Miami. We'll see. The Browns could very well be a 2-win team coming out of week 7, but I haven't seen like the wow play, a single one really from Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, it can't. Uncle Ted said can't be any worse. Trust me, can always be worse. We've seen some quarter play that just illustrates that point so far this season. It's been really bad. I'm not defending Gabriel. It can always be worse. By the way, the Steelers on Thursday night, one of their tight ends will score a touchdown against the Bengals. I can't tell you which one because it's the Steelers, and they have 4 of them now that have caught passes. Hayward being the latest to catch a touchdown there against the Browns. So that was kind of annoying. Finished with Pats and the Saints. We haven't talked about them yet either. This was a really impressive game by Drake May. The Drake May stands were already loud. They're increasing their volume now. As they should. I mean, Patriots and the Saints really did like all their work in the first half of this game. My best bet of the week, Jeff, was the under 46. I have no idea how that hit. We had 38 points on the board in the first half, 7 scores in the first 8 drives between the two teams. But I guess we had just enough field goals to somehow go under. Drake May was great. He was dialed in, hitting big plays. It ended up being Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas, who were the big recipients this week. Quiet day for Stephon Diggs, quiet day for Hunter Henry. As far as the Saints go, not a whole lot here. They hit one explosive right away to Chris Olave, who continues to just play better than the fantasy points would imply. It's like every week he's like 11 to 14 fantasy points. And I think hopefully there will be more of a payoff for that coming because he's way up there in terms of team target share, total targets, things like that. But the Saints are just struggling to finish off drives. Both teams were penalized a ton in this game, and New England is the only team with more penalties on the season than the Jaguars, which is a Herculean bar to clear because Jacksonville gets penalized like 10 times every single week. So that's still kind of something to monitor with the Patriots. And then Alvin Kamara got banged up a little bit, saw fewer snaps this week once again, was still the lead back, went 10 for 31, had 5 for 45 through the air, so you'll live with that. Kendre Miller just 8 for 21 on the ground, 1 target, 11 yards. Yep. And, you see, Taysom Hill being that grinning jackal that just steals all of our fantasy love from everybody as well. New England gives up explosive plays in the passing game. Something to watch for there. They the Saints hit right away on that throw to Olave. They hit, Rattler hit a couple of deep balls, and they're among the league leaders in giving up long distance throws so far this season. But they play Tennessee this week. I don't know if that can be exploited. Maybe Ayo Minor hits on a play or two, but because I don't think Ridley's going to play this week with the hammy injury there. So we'll see about that. But good news. Pat, it's good to be a Pats fan. Their schedule's great, and they position with that win over Buffalo. They position themselves to be a pretty decent place here. Yeah, first place in the AFC East. Maybe we'll end on this, Jeff. A parting thought on Survivor. Just about everybody's got the Patriots available. I saw somebody tweeted out. It's like they're like 91% available in Circa Survivor. Do you trust the Patriots on the road at Tennessee this week? Second week in the row on the road too. I have not decided yet. Some of that depends on whether I want to use the Chiefs now or hold them for the Christmas and Thanksgiving slates because they play both. I wasn't planning on using them there. But some plans go to waste. I mean, the teams I were planning to use were either Baltimore or Philly on the Thanksgiving slate. Well, both of those teams are kind of at a downswing. And then I was thinking about using Washington on the Christmas Day slate. Yeah, that's not looking as comfortable either. So I might want to just preserve my options, but that you have to choose somebody. Might be the Bears this week. We'll see. I got the Chiefs in all 3 of my live entries. So I've tried to avoid doubling up just to differentiate a little bit, not to lose all 3 on the Arizona Cardinals or something like that. But this might be the week I go all in on KC. All right. We'll leave it at that. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Really appreciated you listening to especially those who were jumping in on the live stream, but also those who listen on the podcast. If you like this podcast, please like, rate, and review. As always, subscribe to the RotoWire videos on YouTube, and hopefully you want to subscribe to RotoWire. More importantly, you can get 15% off any RotoWire subscription. Use promo code YouTube15. That's a wrap. Thanks everybody for listening. Good luck in week 7.